Hello, my name is Xero. I hijacked this channel to talk about. I'm kidding, chat. Hey guys, this is Xero and welcome back to another video on Ragnarok Origin Global. Now today we're going to be talking about MVPs and how do you maximize getting team rewards. Now, team rewards are very important to try and get, especially if you are a free-to-play or low-spending player. It's not just a contest for whales to see who can do better DPS. No, there's a lot of mechanics that goes into it that even a medium or low spender like yourself can maximize and try to get the sweet juicy team rewards. Now, team rewards are very important because that is at least 5,250 diamonds that you could be getting throughout a week. So that's what my party does every day. We have a fixed party. We get together every day at a fixed time. We try and get 5 team rewards as quickly as possible while also getting our personal rewards as well. So if you guys are trying to figure out how to get these sweet rewards, check out the rest of the video. Now, before we start, we need to understand how the point distribution system works. The point distribution is basically split up into 4 different categories, which is the damage taken, damage dealt, healing, and deaths. Now, the MVP team reward is awarded to the party or the player who has the highest accumulated points out of all the other parties or players who are participating in this exact same MVP regardless of the channel. Now, the accumulated points are added up from damage taken, damage dealt, healings, and death. A very important part about this table, as you guys can see here, is the discrepancy between damage dealt in rank number 2 and rank number 3 of the point distribution. It is a 20-point differential between rank number 2 and rank number 3. Hence, it is very important to have very good DPS in your team, but you can also still win in other parts as well. In terms of death points, they don't scale linearly. They are sort of a range. If you die 1 to 10 times, your entire team points are deducted by 1. If you die 11 to 20 times, minus 2, and etc. It is capped out at 5 points. So if you die more than 31 times, don't even worry about it after that point because it's all going to be the same after that, especially in bosses such as Double. Now, a quick explanation on how do you get all these points. Damage taken is the amount of damage you've taken from a boss during a duration. Now, damage taken can only come from the boss or its summons, whether it's a normal attack from the boss or a skill, it only accounts for that. Any mobs that are attacking you that are spawned naturally during the boss run will not count for damage taken. Damage dealt is as simple as the amount of damage you deal to the boss during its lifespan, and healing received accounts for all HP lost during the duration of the boss fight. Now, HP loss is a very important term to remember because it accounts for every bit of HP you lose during the boss run, whether it comes from your sigil or whether it comes from the damage taken from the boss. Now, damage taken and HP loss are not the same, so healing will only count for healing or replenishing HP loss obtained during the boss fight. Now let's get into the strategies for each and every one of the bosses that are available currently in the Ragnarok Origin Global. Now, for the first one, we're just gonna breeze through it really quickly because there's actually no real strategy around it except trying to find them as quickly as possible. It is Devling, Angeling, and the Golden Chief bug. Now, I know I said there's no strategy, but there is a little bit of a strategy going on if you want to maximize your chances to get the MVPs for these 3 bosses. First, what my party likes to do is we like to split up across the map to make sure that we are able to cover all bases and be the first ones to attack the bosses. So what we do is we have callouts for different parts of the map. For example, in Pouring Island, we have these different places where each one of our players will be stationed at, and then we'll be able to spread out and cover as much ground as possible. That's mainly for Angeling as well as Devling. Now, for Devling also casts an AoE skill that does damage over time. So make sure if you're trying to go for Devling that you stand on that so that you get the damage taken points from Devling, which will not last very long. So make sure you maximize that duration if you're reaching early because that will secure you the MVP for Devling. For GTB, on the other hand, it is a symmetrical map and it is designed in a way as such that you can cover a lot of ground by walking in a specific path when you divide the map into 4 quadrants. Now, if you look at this video, I'm walking at the edge of each section so that I can have a peek of what's at the next section. So that helps in covering as much ground as possible. So what you want to do in GTB is to have 4 people covering 4 corners, 4 sides of the map, and have 1 person just spamming his flywing and trying to find it randomly. So that will allow you to maximize your chances to be able to find Golden Chief bug before anyone else. You don't really need a tank for these 3 bosses, it's nice to have, but just because of how short the whole duration of the fight is, you're not gonna get a lot of value from having a full-on tank, so might as well just go for 4 DPS and then just stand on their AoEs to have the damage taken. Now the next 2 bosses I want to talk about are both orcs. It's the Orc Lord and Orc Hero. Generally, the strategy around Orc Lord and Orc Hero are pretty much the same. It is very important to have a tank because both of these bosses don't do a lot of AoE damage. So having a main tank with Provoke is going to give you a lot of damage taken points. So it is imperative that you find a tank to help you in that sense. There is some AoE skills that are used by them, but they do not account for a lot of damage, so make sure you get a tank for this boss. Otherwise, it's a very straightforward boss here, nothing much to talk about. Remember to use your fire converters, and of course, being earth element, there is no element card for it, so you just have to do with what you have. Now, Maya is a very special earth boss that requires a little bit of maneuvering and mechanics to work with. The map is pretty big in Intel, but finding Maya is half the issue. Maya doesn't do a lot of single target damage. Most of his damage comes from Brandish Spear. And to maximize the damage you take coming from Brandish Spear, you have to make sure that you are in an empty channel, as empty as possible, because Brandish Spear will not hit more than 10 targets. A lot of bosses which have AoE skills do not hit more than 10 targets. So when you're looking for some of the bosses that I'll explain a little bit later on as well, you want to make sure that you have as empty as a channel as possible. Brandish Spear is cast now and then, and it casts in the direction where Maya is facing. Maya might change the direction before he casts his Brandish Spear as well. So in order to maximize the damage taken from Maya, make sure to always move to the front of the face of Maya in order to take the damage. Now, Goblin Chief is an MVP with both AoE earth damage as well as single target physical damage. So it's very important for you to have a tank for this boss, because if you're able to soak up all the physical damage that it does to the single target with your tank, whether it's a knight or a paladin, you're able to have very high damage taken points and have a good chance to win MVP just based off that alone. Now, a very unknown mechanic for Goblin Chief is that when it goes into defense mode, it gives you a window to steal the aggro from your opponent's tank. During defense mode, he cannot be provoked. So once the defense mode ends, at the exact moment that it ends, there's an opening for someone else to be able to provoke Goblin Chief, and that provides an opening for you to take up as much damage as possible. So if you are a good tank, if your party has a good tank, you should be able to hold on the aggro throughout the rest of Goblin, and once he goes into Berserk mode, which is at 40% or below, you're going to be taking up so much damage. Our next MVP is Drake. Drake is very similar to Goblin Chief or Goblin Leader as well. It has high single target physical attacks that you really want a tank for, but it also does some AoE damage with the water splashes as well, with the water park, right? So it is very important for you to have a good tank, but ideally the tank should also do damage to Drake as well. There's no real other strategies there for Drake. It's a very straightforward boss, and there's not really too much mechanics to go around it. You can try and get hit by the water fountains as much as you want, but in the long run, the damage taken point really just comes from his auto attacks and the water balls. Edgar is very similar to Drake in the sense that it does high single target physical DPS and also has some AoE. The only real min-maxing you can really do around Edgar is really just to stand close to it and just soak up Magnum Break damage, much like in Maya, but instead of just in front of Maya, Magnum Break does the damage in a circle around Edgar. So you really just want to hug Edgar right next to it and always soak up the Magnum Break damage as much as you can. That will help your tank in getting a little bit more damage taken points and will help you in getting the MVP towards the end. Mistress is one of those weird bosses where it doesn't really do anything, but you kind of need the damage taken points coming from it as well. There's no real strategy to try and get hit by the thunderstorm. You sort of have to position your party mates around it and hope that it gets hit eventually. But other than that, this is a good place where Lord Knights as well as any auto-attacking class can start stacking up healing points by using Sigils or Berserk. Osiris itself is a very straightforward boss. You don't really need a tank, but it's really nice to have because it does deal a little bit of physical damage. But the bulk of his damage does come from his AoE skills such as Meteor Assault, as well as that falling coffin coming from the sky. Not to mention, he also casts some Venom Dust that you want to make sure you step on, because that also counts as damage taken. The final important note here for Osiris is that you have to get out of Quagmire, because regardless if you're a spell casting class or a DPS, auto-attacking class, the Quagmire will reduce your DPS, so spend that 1 second to get out of it and continue blasting away. Fioni is another MVP that a lot of players do struggle with because of the mechanics, but it's really just very simple. After the first 2 Storm of Maws, Fioni's attack pattern become fixed. You will do a large area silence followed by summon hold. Next, you will start off with a large area silence. Followed up by summon hold. He'll do 1 Heaven's Drive and then another summon hold. After you see the second summon hold, Fioni will cast Storm of Maw in 10 seconds. So depending if you're on a ranged or melee character, you need to time moving back as far away as you can from Fioni in 8 or 9 seconds. Now, if you're at a stage where you can start tanking a little bit of the Storm of Maw damage, you can start moving a little bit later and also rack up a little bit more damage taken points that way as well. You do need a tank for Fioni because he also does some single target physical damage, but it's not a huge deal because the bulk of the Fioni's damage will come from Storm of Maw. If your party is able to minimize deaths in Fioni, it will help you a lot because, again, remember, each death will take away some points if you reach a certain cut point. A little cool trick you can do with your ranged DPS characters is that you can use these in-game obstacles, in-game trees, in-game rocks to stop your character from being sucked in by the Storm of Maw. That will reduce the amount of damage you deal, and it makes your priest's job a lot easier because all he needs to do is use Sanctuary on a single spot and then he can focus healing the melee characters in your party. Not just trees, but rocks or any sort of physical obstacle in the game does work as well to prevent you from being sucked into the Storm of Maw. On to the tougher bosses now. Moonlight Flower is very similar to Edgar, where it does a lot of single target physical DPS, but also does a lot of AoE damage once it reaches the 40% stage. Now, a tank is absolutely crucial for this because you need that damage taken points from the first 60% of his health, but you have to watch out because Moonlight Flower does also cast Hammerfall, which will cause you to get stunned. And if you get stunned in an unopportune moment, you might lose aggro from that. For players who can tank his meteor, you want to make sure you take in as much meteor damage as you can during the 40% stage and onwards because that will help your tank in getting more and more damage taken points. Dracula, a noble mage who fell and became a demon in the pursuit of immortality. He's cursed to respawn every 2 hours and gets hit by random adventures across Ragnarok. That's the sole purpose of this boss, and at its core, Dracula is not a tough boss as long as you know the mechanics. Firstly, your entire party does need detection except for the priest, and secondly, getting damage taken from Dracula is a real... Dracula's main damage does come from his Grimtooth, and much like a lot of the other bosses, Grimtooth will only hit up to 10 random targets at a time. So you want to enter an empty channel and make sure that your party, as well as pets, is able to take the maximum amount of damage that you can from Grimtooth before everyone starts streaming in. For all the snipers out there, using Sight on Horn card is actually better for your DPS rather than using Detecting, mainly because Detecting's aftercast delay is pretty long and that will be a huge detriment for your DPS. During the early stages, if your channel is empty, you want to make sure that your pets do stay alive for this duration as well. So make sure to drop down a couple of sanctuaries while your Dracula is still doing Grimtooth damage to your entire party. Once there are too many players on the same channel, Grimtooth damage will start being completely random and you will find yourself not taking any more damage after that. So make sure you utilize the first few minutes of alone time with Dracula the best you can. Doppelganger is much like Moonlight as well, in the sense that it does a lot of single target physical DPS for the first 60% of its health, but once it reaches 40%, it will start casting AoE skills. Now, the AoE skills are not very painful, nor are they lethal, but it's nice to soak in as much as you can to help out your tank to get that damage taken point. As Blueberries has pointed out, you can use Safety Wall to help you survive the defense ignore attack coming from Doppelganger, and also still allow you to get the tank points from that skill's damage as well. So it's very important to have Safety Wall cast on your tank in order to keep aggro as well as get damage taken points. Comparatively, Pharaoh is a very straightforward boss as well. While having a tank here is nice, you don't really need it as Pharaoh's main damage comes from random AoE skills. So a party without a tank or a party with full DPS can have a good chance to get the team reward for Pharaoh as well. The main mechanic you really need to watch out for in Pharaoh is actually just positioning. Pharaoh's punch does displace you quite far away if you are not positioned properly. You want to make sure that important members in your party have their backs facing the wall perpendicular to Pharaoh. So when the fist does eventually hit you, you will not be displaced too far and continue doing DPS, maintaining aggro, or just continue healing your teammates. Last but not least, it is Baphomet, the big demon of Runic Guard. Fighting Baphomet is all about maintaining aggro while also having all of your party mates tank as much AoE skills as possible without dying. It is the true limit test on how much you know your character's tank ability, as well as knowing what sort of skills you can take and what sort of skills you should avoid. Baphomet is a tough boss to fight, not just because of its damage and OTK potential, but also because of all the random hellstorms that he plants all around, and you sort of have to try and deal damage while avoiding them or trying to out-heal them as well. It's not a fun boss to fight, so I tend to avoid this boss as much as possible just because of how random it can get. Now, initially there was more to this video where I talk about each job's way to min-max their own playstyle in each different MVP. But unfortunately, this video has gone a little bit too long for my taste, so I'm gonna leave it at here for now. But make sure you check out the next one if you are interested to find out how you can perform better in MVPs and help your team get a team reward. That's all the time we have for you guys today. This is Xero, signing out.